She came in torn clothes with her little boy, but the single dad saw the most beautiful heart. The night was cold, the kind that bites through skin and finds its way into the soul. The rain had been falling for hours, painting the streets in silver streaks of sorrow. At the corner of the dimly lit park, a woman stood trembling, her clothes torn, her face pale and her eyes hollow with exhaustion. Beside her, a little boy clutched her hand, his small fingers shaking from the cold. They had nowhere to go, just two lost souls swallowed by the indifferent silence of a sleeping city. And from the other side of the street, a man watched, a single dad, holding an umbrella and a bag of groceries, unaware that this one moment would change the course of all their lives forever. If you believe in kindness, in second chances, and in the quiet power of love that heals even the deepest wounds, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Son Stories. Your support helps us keep bringing these true-to-heart stories to life. The man's name was Ethan Cole, a 34-year-old single father who had learned to survive in silence. His wife, Lily, had passed away 3 years earlier in a car accident, leaving him with a daughter, Emma, who was only 6 at the time. Ethan had buried his grief behind routines. Wake up, make breakfast, drop Emma at school, work long hours at his small auto repair shop, come home and collapse into bed. His life had become predictable, dull, and safe, and until that rainy night. When he saw the woman, his first instinct was hesitation. People avoided getting involved. It was easier that way. But there was something in her eyes. Not just fear, but pride, and a quiet strength fighting against defeat. She wasn't begging. She was holding her little boy close, whispering to him that everything would be okay, even when it clearly wasn't. Ethan found himself walking toward them before he even made the decision in his mind. The woman flinched as he approached, pulling her boy closer. Her name, he would soon learn, was Grace. Her voice was hoarse, her words hesitant. She said they had just left a shelter after being asked to move on. Too crowded, they said. She had nowhere left to go, no family willing to take her in. Ethan could see the bruises on her wrist, faint but real. Her son, Noah, looked up at him with wide, trusting eyes, the kind of eyes only a child could still have after a storm. That night, Ethan made a decision he couldn't explain. He offered them a place to stay, just for a night, he said. Grace hesitated, unsure whether to trust a stranger, but the exhaustion in her bones left her no choice. When they reached Ethan's modest home, Emma was already asleep on the couch, her school books open beside her. Grace looked around shyly, murmuring thanks, as Ethan found her an old blanket and a cup of tea. The next morning, sunlight filtered through the curtains, and for the first time in weeks, Grace and her son slept peacefully. Ethan watched them from the kitchen, something stirring in his heart that he hadn't felt since Lily's passing. Compassion, not just for their suffering, but for the courage it took to survive it. When Grace woke up, she immediately offered to help. Cleaning, cooking, anything to repay his kindness. Ethan refused, but she insisted. There was pride in her eyes, the kind that said, "I may be broken, but I am not useless." Over the next few days, Ethan learned pieces of Grace's story. She had been married young to a man who promised love but delivered pain. After years of emotional and physical abuse, she escaped with her son, leaving behind everything but her dignity. For months, she drifted between shelters, always trying to find a job, a place, a reason to keep believing. She spoke softly, but her words carried the weight of someone who had seen too much darkness. Ethan found himself drawn to her resilience. She didn't ask for pity. She found joy in little things, in Emma's laughter, in cooking meals with whatever ingredients she could find, in the small garden behind the house that she began to tend. Slowly, the air in Ethan's home changed. The silence that used to haunt the rooms was replaced with the sound of life. Noah's laughter, Grace's gentle humming, and Emma's delighted giggles as they all shared dinner together. But life, as it always does, tested them. One afternoon while Ethan was at work, a man showed up at the house, Grace's ex-husband. His voice was loud, his anger ugly. He demanded she return, threatening to take Noah by force. Grace stood her ground, trembling but fierce, telling him she would never go back. When Ethan returned and saw the man shouting at her, something primal rose in him. He didn't raise his voice, didn't use violence. He simply stood between Grace and her past, his present steady and immovable. The man saw the strength in Ethan's eyes and left, cursing under his breath. That night, Grace broke down for the first time since he'd met her. She cried quietly on the porch, the kind of cry that comes from years of pain held inside. Ethan didn't say anything, he just sat beside her offering silence as comfort. And in that silence, something began to heal. Two broken people sitting under the same moon, finding peace not in perfection but in understanding. Weeks turned into months. Grace found a small job at a bakery nearby, her hands always smelling faintly of flour and vanilla. Noah started school with Emma, their laughter filling the mornings. And Ethan, the man who once lived like a shadow, began to feel alive again. He would catch himself smiling at small things, the sound of Grace singing in the kitchen, the way Noah called him Uncle Ethan, the way Emma looked at Grace as if she had always been part of their family. But the world still had its doubts. Neighbors whispered, some judging Grace for her past, others questioning Ethan's choice to let a stranger live in his home. Ethan faced them with quiet strength because he had seen what they hadn't, the heart behind the torn clothes, the courage behind the scars. Grace wasn't a burden. She was a blessing. On a crisp autumn morning, as golden leaves danced in the air, Ethan finally realized something. His home wasn't just full again, it was whole. And in Grace's eyes, he saw not the pain of the past, but the promise of a new beginning. Love didn't arrive with fireworks. It came quietly, like the sunrise, soft, gentle, but unstoppable. One evening, as they sat together watching the children play in the backyard, Grace whispered that she had been saving money to move into her own place soon. Ethan felt a sudden ache, a fear of losing something precious. He turned to her and said softly that she didn't have to leave. She smiled, tears in her eyes, and said she didn't want to. And so, two hearts that had been broken by life began to build something together, not out of perfection, but out of forgiveness, patience, and the courage to love again. If this story touched your heart, if you believe that kindness can heal, that second chances are real, and that love often hides behind the simplest acts of compassion, please like, comment, share, and subscribe to Single Son Stories. Your support keeps these emotional journeys alive for others to feel and believe in. Special request to comment. Tell us below. Do you believe that people who've suffered the most often have the most beautiful hearts? We'd love to hear your thoughts.